And we are back for prepping for winter with the Barristan sample chapter. Barristan is about to enter the Battle of Fire, a battle heavily paralleled to other battles, with a force of about 6,000 against an opposition that's at least 3 times greater. And in fact, the bulk of the chapter has been about establishing the setting, who is at the battle, and the size of forces. But now, moments before exiting the gate, the chapter shifts and we get a grand speech from Barristan to his squires, a speech on warfare that calls back to the Victarion sample chapter and forward to the Tyrian sample chapter. And so let's get into this speech. He wheeled his silver mare about. "Gather round me, men." When they edged their horses closer, he said, "I know what you're feeling. I have felt the same myself, 100 times. Your breath is coming faster than it should. In your belly, a knot of fear coils like a cold black worm. You feel as though you need to empty your bladder. Maybe move your bowels. Your mouth is dry as the sands of Dorne. What if you shame yourself out there, you wonder? What if you forget all your training? You yearn to be a hero, but deep down inside you fear you might be craven. Every boy feels the same way on the eve of battle. I, and grown men as well. Those stormcrows over there are feeling the same thing. So are the Dothraki. There is no shame in fear unless you let it master you. We all taste terror in our time." So again, directly after a reference to Barristan's horse where Tumco Low speaks the words pale mare, we get another reminder that Barristan's horse, the Silver, is in fact a pale mare. We have a pretty strong literary signal that Barristan is an embodiment of death, the horseman of the apocalypse who rode a pale mare in the Book of Revelation. And if this isn't proof enough that Barristan is death, he prays to the stranger earlier, and quite notably later in the Tyrian sample chapter, Tyrion specifically says that the stranger has mounted his pale mare and was riding towards them, which is something that Barristan was doing at that moment. Now, accepting Barristan as death makes this scene rather curious, as Barristan is now trying to make his 3 squires feel braver and head out into battle, likely to their deaths. And Barristan's speech can be compared to Victarion's in his sample chapter when Victarion tries to convince 3 thralls to blow the dragon horn. Of course, there is less sinister intent to Barristan's speech, and Barristan does love his squires, but the focus is still the same. Both Victarion and Barristan are trying to make men feel braver and convince them to risk their lives and be better tools in war. Back in our analysis of the Victarion sample chapter, we discussed how Victarion's offer to the 3 thralls was essentially the same sales pitch that militaries give to young men. Some nominal financial gain and respect in exchange for a risk of life. And so here we have Barristan peddling a different sort of offer, one that seems to be based on a rite of passage, gaining personal experience, and being part of a larger group. Now, near the end of this passage, we have Barristan say that there is no shame in fear, claiming that everyone is afraid. And this does bring us back a bit to Ned's words to Bran in A Game of Thrones, that only men who are afraid can be brave. Both Ned and Barristan's words are meant to convince people to act despite their fears. However, we should note that there's another side to this. In Bran 3: A Dance with Dragons, after Bran thinks about Ned's line, Mira calls Jojen's bravery and blind following of green dreams stupid. And that is the other side to bravery, stupidity. Fear is the mind warning us not to do something dangerous, and putting that aside is often foolishly perilous. In fact, Tyrion, in a parallel conversation with Penny in his sample chapter, tries to increase her fear as he thinks it'll be good for her safety. And later, even Barristan has to dial back the Red Lamb's eagerness for battle. Fear can certainly be a good thing. "I am not afraid!" The Red Lamb's voice was loud, almost to the point of shouting. "Should I die, I will go before the great shepherd of Lazar, break his crook across my knee, and say to him, 'Why did you make your people lambs when the world is full of wolves?' Then I will spit into his eye." Sir Barristan smiled. "Well said, but take care that you do not seek death out there, or you will surely find it. The stranger comes for us all, but we need not rush into his arms." So the Red Lamb interrupts Barristan to say that he isn't afraid and that in death he will spit in the eye of his god, who is essentially a stand-in for Jesus. This is a rather bold, unprompted, and sacrilegious thing to say, displaying the reckless nature of the Red Lamb. Again, we should remember that Barristan didn't really think the Red Lamb was ready for battle. All ferociousness and no technique was Barristan's judgment, and the Red Lamb is the man who holds the horn, the key to communication with the rest of the army. Now, we actually know very little about the religion of the Lazarene. Mirri Maz Duur spoke a few things about the Great Shepherd, but since she was a deceptive character, we don't know if any of those things were true. She said that the Lázarine believe that all men are one flock to be helped, and that the Great Shepherd protects this flock. But here the Red Lamb speaks of the Great Shepherd being the specific guardian of the Lázarine. So it's hard to say what they believe. They could have diverse opinions. But the Red Lamb brings up a curious question. How is it that the Lázarine are lambs in a world of wolves? How can a purportedly peaceful society survive in a very violent world? Isn't a society without fighters as ridiculous as a society without farmers? How is it that the Lázarine have survived all of these years, especially with the hostile Dothraki right next door? Well, it could be that the rumors about the Lázarine are rubbish. For example, people make jokes about the French being poor fighters despite significant historical evidence to the contrary. The Lázarine might be the same, and it should be noted that they are in a great position to come in from the east and take an undefended Yunkai. Or perhaps the Lázarine combat their foes in different ways. If Mirri Maz Duur was guilty of killing Khal Drogo, as one woman, she destroyed one of the strongest armies on Earth. It may be that the Lázarine take similar, craftier actions to preserve their society. Whatever might befall us on the battlefield, remember, it has happened before, and to better men than you. I'm an old man, an old knight, and I've seen more battles than most of you have years. Nothing is more terrible upon this earth, nothing more glorious, nothing more absurd. You may retch. You'll not be the first. You may drop your sword, your shield, your lance. Others have done the same. Pick it up and go on fighting. You may foul your breeches. I did in my first battle. No one will care. All battlefields smell of shit. You may cry out to your mother, pray to gods you thought you had forgotten, howl obscenities that you never dreamed could pass your lips. All this has happened too. So next Barristan attempts to comfort his squires by saying that this is all part of the human experience. Their fear is normal and regular. Their possible screw-ups, normal and regular. Their going to war, normal and regular. And this is similar to the comfort presented in the line, all men die, that Victarion speaks to his thralls. They are part of a group. And turning pain into camaraderie is a common comforting technique. A shared screw-up eases embarrassment, a shared tragedy creates sympathy. Knowing that everyone experiences a painful rite of passage makes one feel that they are part of something greater. And this feeling is exploited with warfare as well. Military families are fairly common, that is, wanting to fight because their fathers or grandfathers may have fought. Military organizations often act as brotherhoods or fraternities, and people often try to connect with their heroes and leaders who may have fought by doing so as well. And so Barristan is tapping into the human desire to be part of a group and have experiences when he pushes the idea that this has all happened before to better men. So Barristan then claims there's nothing so terrible and nothing so glorious as war, and we should remember that Victarion also looks forward to the glory of war in his sample chapter. However, Tyrion in his sample chapter specifically thinks that only a younger man would find war exhilarating and only a stupider one glorious. Victarion and Barristan are certainly not younger than Tyrion, and so we can deduce what comment is being made about Victarion and Barristan. Now Barristan then starts mentioning various things that can happen to a person in war and that have happened to better men. One may drop their weapon, as Maslin did at the Fist of the First Men against the others. One may foul their breeches. Sam pisses himself against the others, and Tyrion shits himself after the Battle of the Blackwater. One may howl obscenities, as Morgan Little did against Asha Greyjoy. He later apologizes for the obscenity, but not for trying to kill her. And one may pray to forgotten gods, as Asha does before the Battle of Ice. The one that is the most notable is the calling out for one's mother, as this is how the Tyrion sample chapter begins, with Tyrion hearing a dying man doing this. Some men die in every battle. More survive. East or west, in every inn and wine sink, you will find graybeards endlessly refighting the wars of their youth. They survived their battles. So may you. This you can be certain of. The foe you see before you is just another man, and like as not, he is as frightened as you. Hate him if you must, love him if you can, but lift your sword and bring it down. Then ride on. Above all else, keep moving. We are too few to win the battle. We ride to make chaos, to buy the Unsullied time enough to make their spear wall. So next Barristan says that the chances are they will survive the battle, and they may be lucky enough to be an old man one day bragging about it. Interestingly, Barristan's argument to his three squires is the inverse of Victarion's argument to the three thralls. Victarion said that they might as well blow the dragon horn as they might die in battle, implying that the probability of death in battle to be high. Barristan is saying the reverse, that the probability of death in battle is low. Of course, whether or not something is seen as high or low is a matter of opinion and perspective. In Russian roulette, there's a 1 in 6 chance of dying, thus one will probably survive that. Still, one would probably say the chances of death is high. Barristan is discounting the probability of death significantly by simply saying it's below 50%. Barristan then briefly discusses the lives of their foes. Hate them or love them, kill them, he says. Don't think about it. Let's keep in mind that in battle, you're taking the life of another human being, and even Victarion, an asshole by all accounts, is still haunted by the deaths of his kills years later. But Barristan simply puts forward the need to mindlessly slaughter. We, by the way, hear nothing of Barristan's first kills and his thoughts on them. Of course, the morality of mindlessly killing another in war is an interesting topic, as the forces they face are composed of slave armies. These aren't really foes, but they're brothers in bondage who are not lucky enough to be free. And this slaughter of innocents is seen in the second Barristan chapter. This does seem to be a metaphor for all war, innocents killing innocents as the guilty leaders pull the strings. And finally, at the end of this passage, Barristan gets into his actual battle plan when he's cut off. We don't actually know the full extent of Barristan's plans. It seems to be to create chaos to give the Unsullied time to form up, as well as to take down the trebuchets. But still, they are massively outnumbered. It seems Barristan hopes that the Unsullied, once formed up, would be so invincible that they could sweep around and take out everyone. "Sir?" Leric pointed with the Kingsguard banner, even as a wordless murmur went up from 1,000 pairs of lips. Far across the city, where the shadowed steps of Meereen's Great Pyramid shouldered 800 feet into a starless sky, a fire had awoken where once the Harpy stood. A yellow spark at the apex of the pyramid. It glimmered and was gone again. And for half a heartbeat, Sir Barristan was afraid the wind had blown it out. Then it returned, brighter, fiercer, the flames swirling, now yellow, now red, now orange, reaching up, clawing at the dark. Away to the east, dawn was breaking behind the hills. Another 1,000 voices were exclaiming now. Another 1,000 men were looking, pointing, donning their helms, reaching for their swords and axes. Sir Barristan heard the rattle of chains. That was the portcullis coming up. Next would come the groan of the gate's huge iron hinges. It was time. So here we have the lighting of the beacon fire atop the Great Pyramid, and we actually heard about the planning of this fire in the Queen's Hand chapter. It's a signal for attack that ensures simultaneous assault from the other gates as well, the ones with the Mother's Men, the Stalwart Shields, and the Free Brothers. The fire nearly going out and then returning is likely supposed to represent Meereen, as well as the return of dragons and Targaryens, Dany being the last and nearly dying, but ushering in a new dragon age. Now, it should be noted that the pyramid is 800 feet tall, which makes it enormous. That's nearly double the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it actually makes Meereen's pyramid taller than the wall at 700 feet, and likely around the height of the High Tower of Old Town, which is said to be taller than the wall. Now, there is some question on why things need to be so tall. The pyramids of Giza were done for status, but also so that they could be seen from Memphis 12 miles away. And there is of course some utility to have things at height. The wall, for example, allows the Night's Watch a view of over 30 miles out. And here Barristan is utilizing height for communication. And all this does make one wonder why the High Tower of Old Town needed to be so tall. It's supposedly a lighthouse, but no lighthouse needs to be that tall. And so I also wonder if it was a beacon or a viewing tower for military defense. So the portcullis starts coming up, and Barristan anticipates the groan of iron hinges. Now, George R.R. Martin loves the imagery of iron hinges groaning, and they appear all over our story. Iron hinges groan, for example, when Tyrion heads out into the Battle of the Blackwater, and he awakens to iron hinges after his injury in a storm of swords. Harrenhal has creaky iron hinges when Jaime arrives, and there are dozens of other examples. However, the iron hinge that makes the most prominent appearance in our story is the one from the dreams of Aeron Greyjoy as he remembers the molestation done by his brother Euron, and so we should associate the iron hinge with fear and coming horror. The Red Lamb handed him his winged helm. Barristan Selmy slipped it down over his head, fastened it to his gorget, pulled up his shield, slipped his arms inside the straps. The air tasted strangely sweet. There was nothing like the prospect of death to make a man feel alive. "May the warrior protect us all," he told his lads. "Sound the attack." And so here Barristan puts on his last bits of armor before battle. Interestingly, he has a winged helm. I can only imagine the wings on this helm are dragon wings for House Targaryen, as there is no bird associated with House Selmy. Of course, with these dragon wings, this makes Barristan a white and gold dragon riding forth, which are the same colors of Viserion flying above. Now, Barristan thinks the air tastes sweet, attributing it to the coming battle, making him feel alive. This is a parallel to the Tyrion sample chapter, where Tyrion breathes in the salt air and thinks of the coming battle. Barristan is reinvigorated by the coming battle, while Tyrion is terrified of it. Now, Barristan and Tyrion are breathing the same air, more or less, with one tasting salt and the other sweet. And we do find this conflation of salt and sweet with Aeron as well, as he oddly finds saltwater sweet. Barristan then orders his squires to sound the attack, which should be an order to the Red Lamb to blow his horn. During the Battle of the Blackwater, Stannis' navy sounded their attack with 3 blasts of a horn, and so I imagine the Red Lamb will be doing the same. 3 is the magic number. 3 blasts of the dragon horn is what Victarion is planning, and we know that 3 blasts signify the others up in the north. And this brings us to the end of the first Barristan sample chapter. However, there is a fan summary of the events of the second Barristan sample chapter, and so next time we'll be discussing Barristan 2. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.